Hello, students. This is Dr. J, and we are at part 3. We're going to talk about references and in-text citations. This is just going to cover the basics. This is going to help to ensure that you have a general understanding of how this stuff works. So in this short video, we're going to talk about references and citations. We're going to start with why we add research, why we add these in-text citations. There's 3 general reasons, but one primary reason, and that is right here, to validate the information that we shared. When we're writing a paper and we make a statement of fact in our paper, we are validating that information by saying it came from this study. It came from this expert. And what I like to tell students often is you're not an expert in your field. So when you go to a research paper that talks about a study and you're putting some of that information into your writing, you then need to validate that information. Tell the reader where that factual information came from. Because we are doing this, we are giving credit to the original source, but we are primarily validating the factual information that we are putting in our paper. And of course, academic integrity. That is one of the most important things. So let me talk about plagiarism. It is defined as the misrepresentation of presenting the intellectual work, writings, ideas, and information of others, and claiming it as your own. Misuse of others' information, regardless of intentional or unintentional use, is a serious concern, can lead to serious consequences. And so what I tell students often is think of it in these terms. You could spend your entire lifetime building a reputation that can be lost in 15 minutes if you plagiarize something. You could burn your entire academic career by plagiarizing. So don't do this. But you should never have to worry about plagiarism as long as you're writing your own stuff, as long as you're doing your own thing. You never have to worry about that plagiarism score when you turn stuff in. If you're doing things appropriately, if you understand the basics of what I'm about to share with you, you'll never have a problem with plagiarism ever. So let's talk about when to cite. Anytime you are not providing some type of common knowledge information in what you are writing about, you need to cite where that information came from. So that is one of the things that you need to keep in mind. Anything that's not considered common knowledge. Direct quotes, of course, facts and figures, numbers. But again, you are not an expert in the field you're writing a paper on. And from an academic perspective, I don't really care about your thoughts and feelings. I care about the facts. I care about the details. I care about the research. That's what I want my students to write about in their papers. So again, we're going to be citing on a regular basis because although you might combine some information, you might occasionally share your own thought or your own idea, especially if that's what you're writing about in the paper. Here's my opinion on it. But relatively speaking, you are providing factual information in your document, in your research paper, and you cite things accordingly. So there are a couple of different ways in which we are going to cite information. So the next question that comes into play is when to cite. Well, quite honestly, anytime you use borrowed information from another source, you need to cite it. Anything that is not considered common knowledge, you need to cite it. So again, you are not an expert in the field that you are talking about in the paper you're writing. Anything that's not considered common knowledge to the vast majority of people walking around on the planet is something that you need to cite. Now, here's the absolute bottom line rule. When in doubt, you always cite it because you can't be penalized for citing information that you really didn't need to cite, but you can get into some serious trouble if you were supposed to cite something and did not. So keep that in mind as you're developing a research paper or writing a discussion post. You're providing factual information. That factual information is then validated with your in-text citation, your reference at the end, and that will validate your statements, and that will certainly keep you from getting in trouble. So you keep things above board integrity-wise. Now, there are three different ways in which we're going to use information that we've gleaned, information we've taken from the research. The first way and the most common way is paraphrasing. Paraphrasing is when we're using information from the original source, but it's written into our own words. It's a little bit shorter. You might use some of your general thoughts and ideas as you're writing this sentence, but it is still taken from the original source. You borrowed this information, the ideas, the thoughts, the theories, the research from somebody else. You have to say where it came from. I'm just going to talk about the general sense of how to do this, and I'll talk about how to add the in-text citation and the reference in the moment. Okay, so first let us focus on what paraphrasing is. Let's say, for example, you're going to write a discussion post on formal writing styles. And you've gone to a source, you've gone to a book, and you are reading this information, and in there, you read, learning to write in a formal style is essential to career and academic development, as is the presentation of facts and research to support personal statements. So again, you're reading a book, and in that book was this sentence. So everybody has that visual, right? And here's what we're going to do. We're writing a short post about the very thing we're talking about in this presentation. So here's how this process works. We're going to identify the points that we want to talk about. So we have this sentence here, learning to write in a, quote, formal style is essential to career and academic development, as is the presentation of facts and research to support personal statements. So research, we're going to present those facts. We're going to put it in a formal style, right? That's the gist of that sentence. Now we're going to share that information back using our own words. Okay, so what happens now is we start thinking about writing a new piece of information. So now I've written, during their program, students learn how to present researched facts through a formal writing style. We've taken a sentence that was published about writing styles. We've read that information, and now we're paraphrasing what that sentence says, but we're providing something in our words, new content. You are going to need to cite this. This is just the basics of how paraphrasing works. Hopefully, we're all clear on that. The next style is called summarizing. This is when we're taking a lot of information and we're crunching it down into a short piece of information. For example, we are reading that same book about writing styles, and here's what the original statements say. Talking about quotations, paraphrasing, and summarizing, which are the three different ways. Quotations are direct word-for-word statements found in any source. Anytime you use 5 or more words from the original source, you must cite as a quotation. These are presented with quotation marks indicating that there is a direct quote, etc. So again, just this original research information here on the left, just have an understanding that this is word for word taken from the text. If we were to put this in our paper, in our post, that would be plagiarism. Here's how we make it not plagiarism. We're going to identify those main ideas. Now remember, this is 3 short paragraphs. We want to crunch that down into a short statement. So we're identifying that quotations, paraphrasing, and summarizing are 3 different ways in which to do research. We're going to combine that information. We're going to make it much shorter by doing this. Quotations, paraphrasing, and summarizing are 3 different ways in which students can add research to their written submissions. These are generally used in combination throughout the paper. So all we've said is here's 3 different writing styles, here's what they are, and now we're going to move into something else, into our discussion post. Because keep in mind, our discussion post is 150 words, right? So if we were writing about something, we wouldn't take all of this information. We would just break it down into a short summary. Hopefully you guys are all getting this, because now we're going to talk about quotations. Let me preface this by saying these are used far too often in discussion posts and written submissions. Quotations are direct word for word statements found in your source. Anytime you have 5 or more words in the original source, you're going to make these a quotation by indicating that with quotation marks. We're going to put the reference at the end and the page or the paragraph number where it came from. Now, many students know this, but let me stress this again. Quotations are used far too often by students, newer students. As students get more acclimated to the program, they start using these less and less. Now, hopefully, after this video, you're going to use direct quotes less. Again, we're reading that same piece of information, and it talks about quotations. And here's what the original source would say. These should be used sparingly or not at all. Better to paraphrase. Use a quotation if there is no other way to say the statement or if needed for expert validation. So you're reading a piece of text from a book, and that's the 2 sentences that are stated in that book. So here's what you're going to do. We're identifying what we want to say there. The most important thing we need to know, use a quotation if there is no other way to say the statement or if needed for expert validation. Use direct quotes sparingly or not at all. Expert validation, no other way to say it. Here's the new piece of text that we came up with. Quotations should be used occasionally. Notice how I said kind of the same thing. Okay, quotations should be used occasionally when there, quote, is no other way to say the statement or if needed for expert validation. Now, let me emphasize this. If I was not doing this presentation, making this video, showing you how to use summaries, paraphrasing, and specifically quotations in this case, I would not have quoted this directly. I would have come up with a sentence that paraphrased the information and avoided using a quote entirely. But again, for the sake of demonstration, to show how this works, I'm using a direct quote. Hopefully you're all getting that because, again, quotes are used far too often. Students turn in a 150-word discussion post, and 60 or 70 of those words are direct quotes. I want to see you write, read the information, take it in, summarize, paraphrase the information back. That is what our objective is here. So now that we have all this information of how to do it, how do we add those in-text citations and, of course, references to the end? So let's first take a look at in-text citations. You can think of in-text citations as a small note or a flag. And it says this information was taken from a source. So an in-text citation is what it is. In-text citation is you're reading that paragraph, you see in parentheses a name, a year, that will tell you where you can go on the reference list to find that information. Just generally the last name and the year, the last name of the author in the year, or last names of the authors in the year. And if it is a direct quote, then we're going to have that page or a paragraph number, and they will look something along the lines of this. Now, as I said earlier, this is just the basics. So again, that last name and that year is generally what they are, or maybe a page or a paragraph number if it is a direct quote. References consists of all the information needed to find that original source. The styles are going to change, of course, on the reference type, but I want you to have a basic understanding of how this works first. An example for that same in-text citation might be Smith, B, 2015, a great internet article retrieved from greatplace.com. So along those lines, that's how the citations and the references work. But the most important thing is that you understand paraphrasing, summarizing, direct quotes first. So now that we have a good understanding of how those 3 components work, let's put them all together in a little sample post. Let me frame this. You've read the information, you've read the research, you've gone through it, and now you're going to pull all that information together and write something new using paraphrasing, summarizing, and direct quotes. One more time. Direct quotes are only used occasionally, and in a writing this short, I would not use one at all. We've gone to the source, we've taken the source information, we've put it into our own words. Now we're going to write something back. There are 3 different ways in which you can incorporate research into your paper. These 3 styles are called quotations, paraphrasing, and summarizing, just like we talked about earlier. Now, we have what is called an in-text citation here. And if you remember what I said earlier, think of this as like a little flag or a marker. And this marker says, hey, reader, the writer has provided you with some information that you can go learn more in depth, or you can go to that original source. And we refer that flag down to the reference section. In this case, if it's a discussion post, it'll be at the bottom. If you're reading a paper, it's going to be at the end. That's the information. That's where you can find it. Now we're going to continue on. Each of the 3 has their place and is used in combination to make a compelling academic paper. Paraphrasing and summarizing are somewhat similar. This is kind of my little thing. I'm like, hey, they're kind of the same in that they take the thoughts and ideas, the research, and are often combined with the writer's thoughts to produce something new. These are generally shorter than the original work. Direct quotations are unique in that they share a direct statement from the original source. The main rule with quotations is that we always use direct quotes when using 5 or more. Okay, here's that quotation mark, 5 or more words from the original source. Where did that come from? Rames, 2012, page number 5. When using quotes, it is also essential to add a page or paragraph number in the in-text citation. Adding research will help ensure your information is valid and ensure academic integrity. Now, again, we go to the marker here and we say, okay, here's the source of information. So if I wanted to go learn more or make sure that you said something that is true and valid, I'm going to be able to go reference that information. Again, let me stress, quotations are only used occasionally. You can write many discussion posts, many papers, and never include a single quote. I give that as feedback all the time because students haphazardly put this information in here. Again, something of this size, maybe 120, 150 words, I'm not going to use a quote in it at all. So let me wrap up with final thoughts. The first being that we reference information to validate our information. We are not experts in the field. We did not do a research study. We don't know what we're talking about, right? Okay. You might be taking a class for the very first time. You're learning about a topic, and this is all new information to you. So we are going to find the factual information, and we're going to validate that by adding research to what we're writing. We share where we found that research. So we provide a reference list at the end. The in-text citations are those flags and markers. At the bottom or at the end of our paper is a roadmap of where to find that information. Always cite whenever something is not common knowledge. You have to tell the reader where that information came from. You do not have to use quotes ever, ever, ever. Use direct quotes sparingly or not at all, perhaps only if you have to say it a specific way. And finally, when in doubt, cite it. You can't ever get in trouble for citing when you didn't need to, but certainly you can get into trouble for having to cite something and did not. I hope you enjoyed this and got a lot out of this. I am going to create part 2 because it gets a little bit deeper than this, but hopefully you've grasped the basics. Mainly keep in mind paraphrasing, summarizing, and occasionally we're going to use those direct quotes. This is Dr. J signing off for now. I hope that you found this video to be of value, and I look forward to seeing you in the very next video.